obvious that Chris Finch got quite a bump out of coming on the Jon Krawczynski show at Head Flyer Brewing. I mean, now he's the Western Conference All-Star coach, and there's a great stat out there. I know, John, you've referenced it. With that big victory at LA against the Clippers, Timberwolves are the only one of 778 teams to win consecutive games by 20 plus points on the road against teams that are 15 games above 500. This is one of the greatest weeks in Timberwolves history. And I just don't know if any of it happens if we don't invite Chris out for a beer.
That's exactly right. There's no doubt that everything started for him and for the team at Head Flyer. Because remember, that was on a Saturday. On Friday, they lost to the Orlando Magic. Yep. And it was really disappointing.
They needed us.
We blowing out. So he comes in, he gets the bump from the crowd, which I really do think gave him a little bit of a perspective after he was kind of not feeling great about it. Walks out of there feeling good, and then they go on this roll. We're going to totally disregard that little Chicago mess that happened. That was a fluke. That was not it. It was clearly now Head Flyer and the Jon Krawczynski show has Chris Finch going in the right direction, has the Timberwolves going in the right direction with dominant wins at Milwaukee and LA. There's just no other possible conclusion that can be reached than it's all our fault in a good way.
Yes, absolutely. Seriously, a lot of good stuff to get to in this show. This is the Jon Krawczynski show. This is our basketball show at talknorth.com. Best way to listen to this show or any show you like at the network, including the Viking Update show, which I highly recommend. Subscribe to your favorite podcast app. It's free. It's the easiest way to listen. We're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios. I want to thank our sponsors, Defined Destinations, TSR Injury Law, Head Flyer Brewing, and Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line. We'll tell you more about all of them later. Brandon Morton is our producer. And again, you can find all the shows and all the archives of shows if you want to go back and listen to Chris Finch at Head Flyer. He was great. You can just find everything at talknorth.com. And we appreciate you listening. Thank you. So put this week and this victory in perspective, because, I went into that Clippers game thinking, okay, if the Wolves are healthy, they do match up well with Clippers. They can defend on the perimeter. They can defend wings. When Jaden McDaniels, was cleared to play, I thought, okay, they have a reasonable chance to win this. I didn't expect them to just bludgeon the Clippers, though. And that's what they did. They beat them up.
Yeah, I think it was a big test that we did want to see how the Wolves would stack up, because the Clippers have, rightfully so, become one of the favorites in the Western Conference with how they have played really over the last 2 months. Going into this game, I believe they were 26-7. They were everything was going well for them on both sides of the ball. Paul George, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, everything was working, and they have rocketed up the Western Conference standings, and they were in second place, right behind the Timberwolves when the Wolves were going into LA. And so you're kind of looking at this as a real kind of litmus test game for where the Wolves were, because they have been sort of stumbling through the end of January, and even with the Chicago game, it did not look like they had the same type of intensity, the same type of focus and precision that the Wolves did have earlier in the season to get to the top of the West and build a lead in the conference. Well, what we saw in LA on Monday night was the Wolves of the first 30 games of the season, the team that came out and was just imposing its will on its opponent. And I think you look at the defensive toughness that they showed. You looked at what Jaden McDaniels did individually, defensively against Kawhi Leonard, against Paul George. And then also, Jim, the ability of the Wolves to stay big against a team that wanted to go small and spread them out and try and shoot them off the floor. The Wolves just use their size to their advantage, as well as they have in any game this season. And so they walk out of this game, I believe, with a ton of confidence, with a ton of swagger kind of back with them in terms of where they measure up in the Western Conference and their ability to compete against the very best teams in this on this side of the ledger.
No doubt about it. And some of the more impressive things I saw were, number one, that's a team with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, three people who are very difficult to guard. Kawhi Leonard, when healthy, one of the best players in the game. James Harden, an impossible cover because the way he draws fouls and can shoot the three. And they really harassed all three into bad shooting nights and didn't let them, other than a couple of quiet dunks when the Wolves defense let down a little bit in the second quarter. They just didn't let him have anything easy. Kawhi Leonard did not look comfortable, and I'm not used to seeing a healthy Kawhi Leonard look uncomfortable.
Yeah, he's been fantastic all of this season, and this has been much more like the Kawhi Leonard that carried Toronto to a championship. That's how good he has been. But what Jaden McDaniels did to him on Monday night was breathtaking. I mean, there was that one play where he's going to the rim and ready to dunk it, and Jaden blocked him from behind. And those kinds of plays just made things really, really difficult for Kawhi. And I think, that's why I have been bullish on a Wolves Clippers matchup all season long. And there's been other people who are like, oh no, these are the guys that you want to avoid. I'm not as concerned about them for the Timberwolves because you have Jaden McDaniels, you have Anthony Edwards, you have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, guys who want to guard you in isolation. The Clippers want to play a slow game. They want to isolate in the half court, use their talent to hunt matchups that are favorable to them and exploit them. It's very hard to do that with the amount of perimeter defenders that the Wolves can throw out there and with Rudy Gobert sitting back at the rim. It's just not an easy route for the Clippers to take. And so, they've lost 6 games of their last 33. 2 of them are to the Timberwolves. And it's because of just the matchups. And it's because that these guys get up for this game. They want to kind of prove themselves and show their mettle against Leonard, against George, against Harden, big names that kind of bring out the best in the Timberwolves defenders. And you saw the best of it in that game on Monday night. I mean, it was Paul George was 5 for 16. The Clippers as a team shot 41%, 32% from three. And yes, some of that was an off night shooting, but a lot of it was just that they were contested shots, that this was hard work for the Clippers. And so they just had a really hard time with it, especially in that second half, just getting bum rushed. And in that third quarter, it was one of the more impressive efforts the Wolves have put forth all season.
No doubt. And I thought Jaden McDaniels being cleared to play and then playing with the enthusiasm he did on defense. I mean, that, there are a lot of different factors in this victory, but Jaden McDaniels looking like he was eager to cover some of those guys. I thought that was a big thing for this team.
A huge thing, Jim. One of the things that we'll get into at the end of this podcast, there's a question from SG with our SG Lamb Chops beanie giveaway that I'll get more into it, but Jaden fluctuates when it comes to the level of competition. And we saw last night a locked in Jaden McDaniels, and that just makes a huge difference for this team. And then not only, defensively, but he was 5 of 8 from the field. He hit a 3. He just plays great in his best games against the best opponents. And so his influence on the game was enormous. And then I thought Rudy was just fantastic. Against a team that is designed to make it very difficult for him, he was the one making it difficult for them. I thought that was just a huge thing.
No doubt about it. And, I'm not surprised they won. I did a lot of radio hits on Monday and I said, hey, if McDaniels is healthy, I wouldn't be surprised to win this game. I'm very surprised they won going away while getting a 1 for 11 3-point shooting night from Edwards. He did not have his shot. The starters go 4 for 23 from 3. It surprises me how easily they won without getting easy points.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that Timberwolves fans can look to if in terms of trying to find hope for this offense, right? We've talked all season long about the Timberwolves needing to pick up their offensive efficiency to help to match what they're bringing defensively, get it up in the top 15, get it up in the top 10. If you really want to make a huge, a deep run in the playoffs, you have to get more efficiency out of your offense. One of the reasons that the Timberwolves were kind of struggling earlier in the season offensively is that when Anthony Edwards either had an off night or was sitting and resting, the Wolves offense just completely fell apart. And that was not the case against the Clippers last night in terms of, Edwards was really good in the third quarter, getting to the basket, getting free throws, and kind of using his force and his physicality to change the rules of engagement in that game. But he was 1 for 11 from the 3-point line. He was not locked in and did not have one of those crazy shooting nights that he is capable of having. And yet the Timberwolves still produced 121 points. They still shot 54% from the field. They only turned the ball over 13 times. So you saw another route that the Wolves can take to great offense when it's not carried by Anthony Edwards. And I think that's really significant for their kind of their future and how they're going to have to win games, not only down the stretch here as they jockey for seeding, but also in the playoffs when teams game plan around it. What you saw last night from the Clippers was they were doubling Anthony Edwards a lot, trying to get the ball out of his hands, figuring that if they got the ball out of his hands or they created turnovers from Ant with those aggressive double teams, that it would be the way to short circuit the Timberwolves offense. Instead, what Anthony did was pass the ball, made the simple play. He had 8 assists, 1 turnover in the game. In the last 2 games against the Clippers and the Bucks, 17 assists, 1 turnover. That's if Anthony Edwards is playing with that kind of care and that kind of discipline, I don't know how you beat the Timberwolves, not in a 7-game series, because opponents have feasted on the mistakes of Edwards and Towns in the offense on the offensive end, and that's how they get their points generated in transition against this defense. And so when Anthony Edwards is taking care of the ball the way that he did and making the right play and being patient the way that he was, it just opens everything else up. Cat is 8 for 12 and 24 points. Rudy 17 points, 6 for 10 from the field. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like they're Naz Reid got going, so they have other weapons that once Ant is not ISO, dribble, and gets everyone else involved, they're really tough to cover. And I thought that was just a revelation last night to see him do that in a big game against a very good defensive team.
All right, next let's talk Monty Morris, maybe another Morris, whether beating the Clippers these days improves perception around the league. Let's talk about Amir Coffey and which of the other contenders is really the biggest threat to taking the number 1 seed away from the Timberwolves. Right now, though, John, tell us about your trip. Tell us about Defined Destinations.
Super excited about this trip, Jim. We're partnering with Defined Destinations to go to Spain August 22nd through 29th. We're going to go to Madrid and Barcelona. 3 days in Madrid, 3 days in Barcelona. We have 4-star hotels in the heart of both cities. We have local guided tours that are going to take us to museums, that are going to take us on tapas and sangria food tours. We're going to see all sorts of different amazing sites. We'll have a couple of dinners together if you sign up at Defined Destinations for the Jon Krawczynski Spain trip. And so we'll have some fellowship. We'll talk some Timberwolves. We'll talk some Vikings in two of the most exotic cities in the world. And here's the other really cool thing about a trip like this. There is going to be plenty of downtime for yourselves as well. If you want to bring a significant other, if you want to bring a family member, you want to bring friends, you want to go off and do your own exploring, that's all good as well. These trips are designed for us just to have kind of a skeleton of a plan with plenty of options if you don't feel comfortable, or if you just want local expert help to really see the best sites and have a great time, or if you just want to go out on your own and enjoy Spain the way that you can, do it. And these trips, the airfare is covered, the hotels are covered. So much of the trip and the organizing and the planning of it is covered. And so I hope you sign up. It would be wonderful to have you along with going to Madrid and Barcelona. DefineDestinations.com is where you go to find more information. Sign up and go with us, and let's have an unforgettable trip in Spain at the end of August.
We want to thank Steve Terry and our longtime sponsor, TSR Injury Law. As Steve always says, all you really need to remember is 612-TSR-TIME. We hope you never need that number, but if you do need that number, if you need an injury lawyer, you want a good one, an ethical one that's going to win your case. The great thing about TSR Injury Law, they're so confident in their ability, they will not charge you unless they win your case, because they win so many cases. 612-TSR-TIME. That's all you need to know. John, tell us more about Head Flyer Brewing.
Head Flyer Brewing, Northeast Minneapolis. A lot of you were out there just a couple of weeks ago, or less than 2 weeks ago for my birthday show that we had with Chris Finch. And I think everyone had an awesome time. It's a great tap room, great beers, great seltzers, any kind of drink that you can imagine that way. They have you covered. And you can bring your dog, hang out with your family, play some games in their wide open tap room. Sit out in the front and at the fire pits and enjoy a cooler winter evening with a couple of beers. They have food trucks there all the time. Neil, Nate, Megan, all the folks at Head Flyer are great people just to be around, and they want to be a destination for Timberwolves games, for Wild games at night, on the weekends, during the week. Go in, watch a couple of games there on their flat screen TVs, enjoy the relaxed environment, and enjoy a local brewery that is very supportive of this show and of local Minnesota sports in general. So Head Flyer Brewing, Northeast Minneapolis. Tell them the Jon Krawczynski Show sent you.
We also want to welcome one of our newer sponsors at TalkNorth.com, Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line.
Shepherd Goods, Lamb Chops clothing. You have seen Jordan Dye at courtside at Timberwolves games. He always has colorful hair. He is always very animated. Sometimes he's getting warnings from referees about talking a little bit too much to other opponents and trying to get in their heads. I think they've been a little overzealous in warning him a little bit, but that's just me. They have unbelievable, comfortable clothing that they make at Shepherd Good and Lamb Chops. Go to sglambchops.com to check it all out. They have sweatpants. They have hoodies. They have beanies. They have real high quality, super comfortable and affordable clothing for you. So I would highly recommend it. I wear a lot of it. One thing to keep in mind this upcoming weekend for All-Star Weekend, they have an All-Star watch party and a pop-up shop coming. So you can go to SG Lamb Chops at SG Lamb Chops on Twitter or X. Also, you can find it on Instagram and sglambchops.com for all the information for their pop-up shop at Nolo's and Basement Bar on Saturday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Free entry for all. Go in, check out some cool clothes, and hang out and watch some of the dunk contest, three-point contest, skills competition with SG Lamb Chops, Shepherd Goods, and Lamb Chops clothing.
Some of us thought they might. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. One more thing for everyone. There's a promo code if you go online to the store at sglambchops.com. Use the promo code JONK20, JONK20, and you can get 20% off your purchase at sglambchops.com.
Excellent. All right. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Hey, that's how our business works. We have advertisers, so we really appreciate if you spend your money with our advertisers, take them seriously. They're the reason we get to continue to do these shows and put them out for everybody. And this show has become one of the most popular shows at TalkNorth.com. So thanks to John, thanks to everyone who listens, and thanks to our sponsors. So how many Morrises are they going to end up adding? They add Monte Morris. There's a rumor that Marcus Morris might want to play for the Timberwolves. First takes through the Monte Morris acquisition. I like it because I wanted them to get a Tyus Jones type if they couldn't get Tyus Jones. And man, he profiles very similarly. He can shoot it. He can handle it. He plays defense. Good personality. Seems like a really good ad.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jim, in terms of he's as close to Mike Conley or Tyus Jones without being Mike Conley or Tyus Jones, in that he's a 39% three-point shooter, so he can knock down shots reliably. Jordan McLaughlin really shot the ball well recently, but I think that there's a little bit of a wonder about, is that sustainable? Monte Morris has been a 39% three-point shooter for his entire career. So I think that there's a little bit more trust that he can be a volume three-point shooter and a threat in that spot from a shooting standpoint. He also, like Tyus Jones and Mike Conley, is an ultra low turnover guy. He does not turn the ball over ever, really. Always one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the entire league. When he was a senior at Iowa State, he set a national record for assist to turnover ratio. This guy takes care of the ball, and on a team that loves to turn the ball over, having another guy who is elite as a assist guy and a low turnover guy is exactly what they need. So he comes in. He will probably take a little bit of time to ramp up. He played some minutes against the Clippers and looked solid, but he had missed the first 43 games of the season with Detroit with the quad injury, and so I think he's still working his way back into shape. And that's going to be a process. He told us last weekend that he is going to stay in Minnesota during the All-Star break just to continue to work on his conditioning and get himself settled and back up to speed that way, because the Wolves have 8 sets of back-to-backs, including one, and we're recording this on Tuesday morning. They play Tuesday night in Portland over the last 30 games. And so they're going to need Monte Morris to play big minutes, to spell Mike Conley, to help out and just run the team. He's a little bigger than Jordan McLaughlin as well. Like you said, Jim, very much a team-oriented guy, very popular in every locker room that he's been in. So Tim Connolly knows him well from having drafted him in Denver. And so there's just a lot of familiarity there, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think it was a really good trade by Tim Connolly, because he gave up 2 players, Troy Brown and Shake Milton, who were not playing, and he's bringing in one player that is going to be playing and playing a pretty significant role for this team going forward.
No doubt about it. And then the only guy on the roster who really seems to need load management is Mike Conley. Now you have a guy who can play that role.
Yeah, and I think that there have been signs over the last couple of weeks that Mike Conley has looked a little bit tired on occasion. There have been some uncharacteristically poor shooting nights. He's turned the ball over just a little bit more than he normally does. The All-Star break, I think, will do him very well and give him just a little time to rest and kind of re-energize for the sprint to the playoffs that will happen afterward. But yeah, just to have a guy who can come in, and then you can either give Mike Conley an off night on a back-to-back or something like that, or at the very least, you don't have to play him 30 minutes a night. You can play him 24 minutes. And I think that will go a long way toward keeping Conley fresh for the playoffs as well, because he's so important to what they do. So that's why they prioritized backup point guard over the shooter kind of role. That was another need for them, is they felt that getting Conley some rest and not having to rely so much on him was very important for them going forward here.
Yeah, all makes great sense. How about Marcus Morris? Do you believe the rumors? Is he on his way to the Timberwolves?
Well, you have to believe the rumor, because the rumor started from Pat Beverly,
right?
Who
I know
knows Marcus Morris really well. And so what I can say is what Pat Bev said was that Marcus Morris is leaning toward signing with the Timberwolves. Now, there's a couple of things to make clear here. I am 100% sure that Pat Bev has talked to Marcus Morris, and Marcus Morris has told him that he likes the Timberwolves option for him when he gets bought out from the San Antonio Spurs, that they are attractive to him, and that he maybe might even be leaning toward them versus what other options are out there. From the people that I talk to within the organization, I don't think any final decision has been made. First of all, Morris has not been bought out by the Spurs. He hasn't reached the market, so this is a little cart before the horse. But second of all, I was told that the Wolves will try and take the All-Star break to really evaluate all of their options on the buyout market and see what the best path forward is. They have 2 more games against Portland. If they can win both of those games, go into the All-Star break at, 23 games over 500, and feeling really good about themselves, then they can really evaluate, take a breath, and say, okay, what do they need? But they definitely do have interest in Marcus Morris as a good spot up catch and shoot guy from 3. He's a tough dude. So you can see him fitting in intense playoff environments sometimes. Do I think he would come in and be an immediate, 18-minute a night rotation guy? No, I do not think that. But I think that he would be a really nice addition from a shooting standpoint and a toughness standpoint for this team, just to give them one more option should they need it down the stretch here and in the playoffs. So nothing's done, nothing is imminent, but I do think that there's a good chance that something like that could happen with Marcus Morris and the Wolves.
Perception doesn't really matter in the real world, but I just think Minnesotans are, still have that little bit of an inferiority complex, especially Timberwolves fans, Minnesota sports fans. Does beating the Clippers resonate around the country, or is it just another Western Conference battle that nobody pays much attention to? I mean, used to be if you beat the Lakers at the Forum, it really meant something, and the Clippers have been very good lately. Does this mean something?
I think it does to people who follow the league closely. The Clippers have been the trendy pick right now. They are everyone's favorite in the West with the way that they have been playing. And so I think a performance like that really does open some eyes to some analysts, to some league observers who I think were frankly right to be looking at the Wolves out of the side of their eye a little bit. Like, hey, why do they keep giving up these leads in the fourth quarter? Are they really legitimate? Is this a team that is for real, that is really ready to contend in the West, or are we seeing them kind of fall back to earth a little bit? But a couple of recent wins at Oklahoma City and certainly at the Clippers, I think does sort of change the narrative around them a little bit. Now, which was one thing that was really telling, Jim, is Rudy Gobert in his interview with Leah B. Olson after the game on Bally Sports. He said a lot of good things about the performance, about everything that was going on. But at the end of the interview, he said, now we have to see how we handle success. And that's referring to these last 2 games before the All-Star break, after a big win on the road in LA, playing a Portland team that is absolutely terrible. What are they going to do? And so Rudy knows that this is a team that in other versions of this season, in other parts of the last couple of seasons, they'd go to Portland and they'd split, or they'd go to Portland and they'd stub their toe somehow. And so we'll see just kind of how they respond both on Tuesday night and Thursday night going into the break against a terrible team that they should handle. But no doubt, I think getting that win over the Clippers in the dominant fashion that they did is going to get some people's attention, talking around the league today as they're kind of reevaluating who is really to be worried about in the Western Conference.
They won at Oklahoma City recently. They won at Clippers recently. They haven't seen the Nuggets in a while. Which of those 3 teams right now do you think is the biggest threat to the Wolves in terms of taking the number 1 seed?
Yeah, I still think, in terms of the number 1 seed, probably still the Clippers, because it does seem like, they're kicking everybody's butt except for the Timberwolves, and they do play the Timberwolves again in LA in March. But I I think that they match up well against other teams. So in terms of just winning a bunch of games down the stretch, it might be the Clippers that are going to do it, or that are going to be the biggest competition, because I do think Denver is playing like the champion they are, in terms of they are not throwing every single thing they have into the regular season right now. They're kind of just doing what they need to do to be in that top four, and playing with the confidence that once they get into the playoffs, no matter what seed they are, they're going to feel great about it. Oklahoma City has leveled off just a tiny little bit. And maybe Gordon Hayward will help kind of boost them back up again. But I'm going to say the Clippers in terms of the number one seed. In terms of the playoffs, in terms of who the Wolves would have to worry about in the West in the playoffs, I think it's still the Denver Nuggets. Like, I think they are a great team that has championship pedigree now, that will know how to attack all of these series. They have the best player in the world. And so that's going to be their biggest obstacle in the playoffs. But for the number one seed and home court advantage throughout the Western Conference playoffs, I think the Clippers might be the team that's going to be nipping at their heels the whole way.
Which Western Conference team improved itself the most at the trade deadline?
I like what Dallas did.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, that was a team that you were kind of looking at and saying, man, maybe they're just, going to be moving around and stuck around, languishing around in that play-in tournament type of an area, and maybe they still will with the depth of the conference. But adding Daniel Gafford, adding PJ Washington, two players that really upgrade spots that they needed upgrading, and they look really good since bringing those guys in, with Luka, with Kyrie. Now all of a sudden with those guys, I feel like they're a team that needs to be watched and needs to be concerned about. Whereas before those deals, I honestly was not all that concerned about them in terms of what they could do in a playoffs in the West, just because I didn't think they had enough talent around Luka and Kyrie. Now adding those guys were great fits, great hustle guys. I think that makes them a real factor in the West.
How's Amir Coffey's career going right now?
It's really taken a step in the right direction, Jim. I think that for the first couple of years of his career, it was just like, okay, is this another one of those tweener position guys who doesn't really have a position in the league and is more of a G League, good college player? But he has really taken a huge leap this year with the Clippers. He's playing 18 minutes a game for them. He's shooting 44% from three, which is enormous, a huge improvement. And he's just a guy who's long, who can switch like they want to switch, who can guard multiple positions, can get to the bucket in transition, has really carved out a nice role for himself in the second unit with the Clippers. And I heard some chatter over the trade deadline that the Clippers looked at other options to upgrade their roster, especially on the bench, and they ultimately kind of decided that, hey, Amir Coffey's been good enough, we don't need to upgrade that spot. And so they stuck with Coffey. He's going to get minutes down the stretch. He's going to get minutes in the playoffs, and I think he is earning himself a real NBA career as a rotation player, and that was not a given just a couple of years ago.
Wow. Interesting. I always liked him as a college player. I just didn't know how he was going to fit in the pros, but he's got length. And with that length, if he can handle and shoot, he's going to have a role someplace.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole key for him is if this shooting from three, now he's not shooting high volume. He was only taking 2 a game, but
right,
if he can knock those down consistently at a 40 to 43% clip, that changes everything for him. He shot 27% last season, shot 38% as a couple of years ago, which was good. So he's got to be as consistent as possible with that shot, because he is long enough that he's kind of that type of player that every team is looking for. 6'8", long arms, can move really well, and if he's shooting at a high level, that just really kind of cements him as a rotation type player in this league, because those are the kinds of players that are really hard to find. And once you establish yourself that way, you're going to have people banging down your door to keep you either there or to bring you somewhere else where you can help a team.
Continues to be a fascinating and fun season. I look forward to watching these games. It's a fun team. We're going to keep talking about it here at the Jon Krawczynski Show. We appreciate you listening. Let's get a final thought from Jon on anything he likes. Once again, this is the Jon Krawczynski Show, coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios. And we want to thank Define Destinations, TSR Injury Law, Head Flyer Brewing, and Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line. All right, Jon, final thought.
Yep, we'll wrap up, Jim, with what we're going to start doing more and more with Shepherd Good and Lamb Chops coming on to the show as a new sponsor. Is every week I'm going to put a prompt out on Twitter and ask for your Wolves questions, and whoever gets selected is going to get a free beanie from SG Lamb Chops. A reminder, go to sglambchops.com and use the promo code Jon K, JONK 20 for 20% off at all their clothing, all their goods at sglambchops.com. But this week's question comes from at Daryl F. Johnston, and he says, how can it be that all of our blown leads have been to mediocre, if not sub 500 teams, while we consistently can finish out games against teams people consider serious contenders? And this gets to what we kind of talked about with Jaden McDaniels earlier in this podcast, Jim, is I do see an increase in focus, an increase in intensity, and an increase in defense from Jaden McDaniels against high quality competition that I do not see when they play the Charlottes of the world, the San Antonios of the world. And he is one of the X factors for this team in terms of turning it from a good team into a potentially great team. When they play teams like the Clippers, Jaden McDaniels is getting after Kawhi Leonard, and he is getting in the passing lanes. He is creating turnovers. He's getting out in transition, scoring, and locking people down. When they play against Charlotte, he is relaxing. He is not bringing that intensity. It is not as difficult for opponents to score defensively. And so the Wolves do not have that same edge. And so I think if that could bode well for the playoffs, because he could, just be locked in all the time with the high leverage games. But if he can kind of gain more consistency in his approach night in and night out, that will go a long way toward evening out sort of the highs and the lows that the Wolves have experienced lately when it comes to giving away big leads against inferior competition. When Jaden McDaniels shows up, they are a different team, and he always shows up against the best teams. So that's one of the big keys and answers to your question, I think.
Good stuff. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, Brandon. This is going to be a blast to watch this team the rest of the way. Check out talknorth.com for shows on the Vikings, Twins, Wild, Gophers, everything else. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you next week.